Cool. Looks like we're live on YouTube as well. We're a couple of minutes past. I'm sure more people will join, but we'll just go ahead and kick things off. Welcome everybody to our final monthly call of the year. I'm sure a lot of you, like me, are trying to wrap things up before the holidays. So thanks for joining. And let's see if I can advance the slide. So as we always do at all of our events, we're operating under our community code of conduct. Just a reminder, we want to have a welcoming and friendly environment. So if you want details of our code of conduct, you can take a look at the full text there. In our agenda topic, you've probably seen it on Slack and other channels where we made the announcements about today's call. Quick community news item. Plus, we thought since this is our call in December, we thought it'd be good to sort of look back on what we all accomplished in 2021. Plus, look ahead to what we're planning to do for 2022 in terms of our product roadmap. I should have corrected this on the agenda slide. We're going to share our roadmap, both for open source and our cloud product as well. We just want to be transparent about both of our offerings. And I have a separate bullet item here for Q&A, but if you have any questions anytime, feel free to interrupt any of our presenters. You can type in questions in the chat, or I'll be watching the questions on Livestream as well. So without further ado, we'll get things started. You probably saw an announcement on the blog post. I just posted a recap blog post from the last workshop. That's the last bullet item here in case you missed the workshop back in, it's already been 5 weeks. Can't believe how quickly things have, time has passed since our last workshop. If you want a quick recap on the last workshop, have a blog post there with links to recordings and the slide decks in case you missed it. As for our next workshop, the topic's going to be on data modeling. When we did the post-event survey for our first 2 workshops, I think data modeling both times sort of showed up as a number 2 topic that people were asking for, and this is one of the fundamental tools that people will be using, and not just in Cube, but analytics in general. So we thought this would be a good topic. So the date is a little over a month from now, on January 19th. It's again on a Wednesday, week after our next monthly call. And you see the agenda there. It's probably similar to flows that you've seen in the past. Just getting started, key concepts, et cetera, et cetera. And if you haven't registered already, go to the events page, events/data modeling. You'll be able to register there. And when you register, there'll be a couple of optional questions towards the end. We ask you a couple of quick questions about, first of all, what challenges you're having with data modeling when you're using Cube, and specifically what topics you'd like to see covered. So your feedback there will be very helpful. So if you can spend a few extra minutes to share your experience or feedback on what you want to see, that will be much appreciated. And definitely looking forward to our next workshop in about 5 weeks. So as I mentioned, just wanted to look back on 2021 and talk about what we accomplished as a community. Not to keep talking about the pandemic. That's sort of the topic that's sort of been the popular discussion topic for a couple of years. And 2021, unfortunately, I think it's just been as challenging as 2020 was. But I only mentioned that because if you compare to what's been happening in that front versus what's been happening in our community, when you look at what we've done, it's almost as if like the world was completely normal around us. Our community continued to grow and even thrive, which has been amazing. And I personally am, very grateful for not just the growth, but the kind of people that we have in our community and that help the product and community grow. So I'm obviously very thankful. And a lot of the important milestones we had as a community and a company, like our Series A funding in the middle of the year, Cube Cloud launch shortly afterwards. I mean, neither one of those would have been possible without a thriving community. I don't think I'm being hyperbolic. I mean, Artyom's on the call. I'm sure you'll stop me if I'm being hyperbolic or even exaggerating. But I don't think that's an overstatement to say the community has been a key engine to what we've been able to accomplish this year. So I want to thank you. So want to share some stats or even qualitative aspects of our community health. When I joined the company in October of 2020, I think we had like little less than 2,000 people on our Slack channel. I mean, now when I looked at the number like a week ago, was reaching 4,400. So we more than doubled the number of people on Slack. I mean, we need to be careful with that number because that doesn't tell you the full health of our community, but it does tell you that over a little over a year that I've been with the community, there's ongoing interest and people are willing. People want to start engaging in conversations or even listen into what's going on our Slack channel. So obviously that's something we're very happy about. And to go along with the Slack channel, we launched our forum on Discourse back in April. And I mean, to be honest, this is something that I've been talking to our team about. This is something I probably could have done a better job of and put a little bit more focus on. It's something that I'll look at next year. But although it's not perfect, but there are definitely a lot of people that are taking advantage of our forum. I mean, the nice thing about the forum is that, I mean, for example, if people do a Google search, you can find conversations that are captured in the forum, which is not possible on Slack. And one of the metrics that I've been looking at are page views. And over the past 7 months or so, there have been more than 50,000 page views on our forum discussion, which is something that we, I personally am pretty impressed with it and happy with, and hopefully I can put a little bit more focus on making sure that our forum continues to thrive. So obviously been very happy with that, although it's not perfect, but we'll look to make a forum a better place for the community. And the other thing was user stories. We published 5, and then we have one more. Hopefully that'll go live. We'll have an announcement on that before the end of the week. So we'll basically have 6 user stories with users around the world. There were one that's to be published shortly is the first one from Europe. So we're picking all, we're covering all parts of the globe and also different industries. We had financial services, life sciences, retail, software, and using different technologies like whether it's BigQuery, Snowflake, et cetera, et cetera. So it definitely showed the diversity of our users, of our community members. And I was really heartened when a couple of people mentioned when they were working with us on the user story, they said this is sort of their way of sort of contributing to the community. They wanted to share their examples and their experiences. So really heartened by that when people said that, and then hopefully we'll continue to have more user stories that people can see and share going into 2022. So moving along, I already talked about our workshop series that we kicked off, and the first one was back in August, I believe, and that definitely exceeded our expectations. I mean, personally, I would have been happy with a 15, 20 people showing up to our first workshop, but I think we actually had close to 100 people for the pre-aggregations workshop. And not only people who participated in the workshop, if you go look at our YouTube channel, if you look at the views, I think when I checked a couple of days ago, the pre-aggregations workshop was reaching 1,000 views already, which is pretty impressive. And multi-tenancy was way north of 200. So hopefully it's a valuable resource for onboarding and for onboarding. So we'll definitely want to keep doing that. If you have other topics that you want to see going forward, please let us know. Definitely want to make sure this is a valuable tool or training material that people can use even years down the road. And finally, despite the pandemic, we started sort of entering into in-person events, which has been a challenge for, a lot of different communities. I talked to other community members and community managers, and especially in-person events, been a challenge. So we sort of ventured into a small gathering in local areas. We had 2 happy hours in San Francisco and in London. You can see the images of the Twitter post there, and the one we had in San Francisco, that was my first in-person community event since like March of 2020. So it was, it was almost surreal. Obviously we didn't have like a huge number of people. It was like more like, a dozen to 20 people, but even with the small group, it was definitely nice to see people in person after interacting with folks over email and Slack for well over a year. So hopefully we'll be able to do more of those. Continue to use it as a vehicle to form bonds between community members. Moving right along. So whether you like it or not, I wanted to talk about contributions on our repo. Whether you like it or not, people tend to associate open source with code and code repositories. And so obviously, contributions and activity in the repo is something that we've been looking at. And we looked at people who contributed to, people who have made contributions to our issues, like including not just opening issues, but also participating in discussions and contributing PRs. We had like well over 1,000 contributions I think I captured this data like by end of November, like over 1,000 contributions throughout the year. And we actually had more than 100 PRs from community members that were submitted that were merged, which I think is a pretty healthy number. So obviously we want to keep that momentum going and make it easy for people to contribute to our code and to our repo. But I was pretty happy to see that number. And the contributions, we shared some of the examples. Good example is the one from last month's monthly call when Luke came and talked about his contribution for GraphQL. We had a lot of discussion on like Helm charts, which Luke coincidentally participated as well. There are a number of people that sort of started that discussion a while ago. Improvements to like a database drivers and also documentation improvements. And I want to point out like on documentation, it's like, this never seems to change whatever community I'm on. Like, I try to acknowledge contributions that come from community members on GitHub. And when I thank people for fixing some of our typos or improving documentation, they sort of come back defensively and say, hey, all I did was find the typo and fix it. And then I want to reiterate my standard line. There's no such thing as a small contribution. Every bit helps. And all the documentation can be neglected, especially in open source projects. But it's a key part of your product. And what you're doing is helping improving our product and helping the next person that read our documentation have a better experience. So, don't ever think that your contribution is trivial, like every bit helps. And I definitely appreciate that. So, I think that's about it. I'm sure I'd miss like other metrics or community health data that I could have talked about, but these are some of the highlights that I reflected on when I look back on 2021. And like I said earlier, your contributions has been key to our success and growth, and really appreciate having the opportunity to work with many of you. And one of the things I think I mentioned it before the live stream, I like to have coffee chats with a lot of the community members. And if I haven't reached out to you yet, please ping me on Slack. And I think I even have my Calendly link on my Slack profile. So feel free to grab a time if you can find the time slot that works for you. But again, big thank you. And sort of wanted to recap the year and looking forward to even better 2022. And I'll turn things over to RTM and Ryan to sort of look ahead on what we're planning to work on next year. So without further ado, do you want me to stop sharing, RTM, or do you want to take control?
That's fine. Yeah, if you can continue sharing,
yeah.
I think that would be helpful. Thank you.
Cool.
Yeah, thank you everyone for joining our community call, the last community call of the year. And we sought to use it as an opportunity to sort of, share what we did in the last year and this year, what major product changes we did, but also chat about what is the future for Cube, how the Cube would look like next year, and what is our product roadmap and a vision. And this year was, that's like only third year of the Cube, but we shipped a lot of changes, and I think Cube is much different right now than a year ago. And looking back into product changes, what we did in the beginning of the year was the major shift from the old kind of original legacy Express.js based infrastructure to Docker, to the new one. And it seems mostly everyone migrated to the Docker now. And then we released our storage layer for caching, Cube Store, which was a very big product update. And I'm glad to see that how many users in the community adopted that for storing pre-aggregations. And then as Ray mentioned, we released a Cube Cloud, and I see a lot of many of you already started to migrate from open source self-hosted to Cube Cloud, and we see a really good engagement on that platform as well, which is really exciting for us. And finally, maybe only months ago, we released a SQL API, which was something that we've been working on maybe for 6 months or so, even more. And a lot of people in the community requested it and asked about how to connect different BIs to the Cube and how to connect different data consuming tools to the Cube. So SQL API was sort of the idea that was born based on these requests, and then we decided to kind of give it a try and release. And based on your feedback, that was really successful. We're really excited and looking forward to make it more mature and to support more BIs. So that's kind of really big part of our vision for the future. And speaking of that vision, I think that's sort of a major question I get asked, and I think our core team get asked in all the conversations with the users and the community members, what is sort of a long-term vision of the Cube and how we see Cube should fit into the modern sort of a data and developer tool ecosystem. And I'm happy to share how we think about Cube, especially what we're going to do for the next year to sort of change Cube, integrate with other tools to make it to be a really integral part of the stack. But before really jumping into that, I just wanted to reiterate one more time what Cube is and what as a Cube superpowers are. So I think we see Cube as a headless abstraction layer on top of data warehouses that helps to provide analytics into any downstream applications, right? And a Cube superpowers, as we see them, are metrics layer, access control, and a caching. And we think about that, there's three main areas. That's why users find Cube useful. With metrics layer, there is a way to build an actual API and query it. With access control, there is a way to manage access for different users. And then finally, caching, also known as pre-aggregations, right? There's a way to speed up queries. So as part of our roadmap, we've always been very focused on these three areas, and we continue to be focused on this, improving different aspects of it. I know that we're constantly receiving a lot of feature requests about, better data modeling, improvements in caching, different access control features. So that's all three major areas that we wanted to continue to innovate. And we see that being a really core part of the Cube or main Cube superpowers. But that's not only the part of work we want to do. We also want to make sure that Cube can integrate with all the tools in the modern data stack and modern development stack to be able to apply these Cube superpowers. Because without really integrations, Cube cannot provide its value, right? Because Cube sort of being in the middle, it kind of just plays this middle role. The most value it provides when it can connect to different tools on both sides, when it can connect to multiple databases, when it connects to multiple data consuming tools. That's why we see that's the area where Cube provides a lot of value, and we want to continue to integrate that. So our big vision is to continue to innovate in our Cube superpowers, but also bring more and more integrations. So today Cube is work very well on top of data warehouses and transactional databases, and provides a lot of analytic kind of, metrics and all of that to mostly in-app analytics. And that's probably how many of you use Cube today. But speaking of the future, we wanted to connect to even more databases and data warehouses. And Ray, can I ask you please to go to the next slide if possible? Thank you. Yeah, so that's how we see the future of the Cube. So basically we wanted to connect to even more number of databases and technologies to the left, including new data warehouses, new transactional databases, and even to the streaming technologies like Kafka, for example. We also hear a lot of requests about transformations tools like a dbt specifically, and we want to integrate with dbt natively and be able to consume metrics and transformation defined upstream in dbt. And with all of that, we also want to provide more and more ways to bring data from Cube into different downstream tools. In-app analytics, that's how many of you use Cube already today, but we also want to better support microservice to microservice use case where Cube being queried from a server side code. We also wanted to provide more support to different BIs and also data apps and notebooks. That's why we recently released a SQL API, which is still in preview, but there is a long crawl ahead of us to mature it, to improve the support for other BI tools and notebooks. And eventually that will become stable early next year. And also we'll plan to support more and more different APIs. So with all of this, the way we see Cube in the future is it can connect to all the major data sources to the left and get all of this data, apply Cube superpowers, which is metrics, access, control, and caching, and then provide the data through the API to different tools consuming data, what we call basically analytics. And with all of that, I'm happy to let Ryan chat more about specific steps, how we want to make that vision reality, and to chat more about what we wanted to build in the next few quarters of the next year.
Yeah, thanks Artyom, and thanks Ray.
Do you want to take control of the slides, Ryan, or?
No, I think we can continue as is.
Cool.
Thank you. Yeah, so as Artyom mentioned, I'll do a brief overview of our first half of 2022 roadmap. So the next 6 months or so, we'll be working on these items. And let me just note as well, there are some links on this slide, which once that's available to everyone, you can use those to see these issues or epics related to each of these on our GitHub project. There are, as you notice, there's not links on every single item, but I'm continuing to add some as well to here. So once I add those, I'll add links for those if you want to dig into the details of each of these after this call. So the first 3 items on this list basically discuss the things that Artyom just mentioned when talking about the future of Cube. So the GraphQL and SQL APIs which we introduced this quarter. We'll be hardening those and making those production grade in the next quarter, and adding more integrations as well for, in particular, the SQL API. And then streaming databases. So we now, we've seen it work with Kafka. We'll continue to add support for other types of streaming data, and then dbt integration as well for data that's been transformed. So all of these things will help expand the use cases for Cube. There really wasn't anything like Cube that existed before Cube came, before Cube was here to solve these problems around data access in a scalable way for all of your data needs. So we started with the REST API. We started with embedded analytics, but now, as you can see, we're expanding to all these different areas where data is necessary as well, and presenting that data in for metrics or for analytics, or even from an app requesting data for doing some computation on as well. All of these use cases, I think, will be well served by Cube. And then some of the other items you may have seen before: roll-up joins across databases. I know we've mentioned this on calls before, that we're working on this quarter. It's going to take a little bit longer to complete this. I think it'll go into next quarter. But the premise here is around being able to create a rollup that sources data from multiple database types. So I've seen quite often, I think in Slack, that people have, for example, been wanting to join NoSQL data, let's say from MongoDB, some data with some data from their SQL databases, whether that's Postgres or MySQL, or to join, data from some traditional transactional databases with data from a cloud warehouse. Those are the use cases that we're talking about serving here with rollup joins, being able to basically cache the metrics from all of these different database types. And then the DB configuration redesign, that's generally, it's actually tied to the item at the first item on the right side of potential items, the multi-tenancy revamp. So those of you who use Cube in a multi-tenant fashion, or if you haven't, I highly recommend, and you want to use it in a multi-tenant fashion, I highly recommend checking out a workshop that we did quite recently around multi-tenancy, and that's on YouTube as well. Those of you who have done this, though, know that it's not entirely intuitive, and there's a lot of edge cases and a lot of gotchas around configuring databases for multi-tenant setup. So if you want one database mapped per tenant or per groups of tenants, I think there's more we can do here to make the experience easier and more intuitive. So for example, how you configure your first database with environment variables it looks different from how you configure other databases that you want to add on top of that. So if we approach that, I think, with consistency in mind, perhaps leaning towards configuration as code as well, I think we'll start to see some major improvements on this workflow. But also, so once you've connected databases, and there are many different types of databases that you can connect, so we have to think about that as well. Generating the schema from those databases, so the Cube schema that we generate from your database tables, there's more improvements that can be done there as well too, such as how we do joins, how we set primary keys. So I think we'll start to see some features that are added to schema generation in that regard too. And then as you probably know, we've been adding features to Playground, query tabs, the rollup designer. there's more that we can do for Playground. I know that Playground is a really critical piece for Cube in that it gives people a very easy way to test their queries in a no code fashion, and then also perhaps inspect what the query would look like in JSON format, or to inspect the SQL behind the query. These are all great things that Playground serves for our users, and we want to continue to make it better for all of you. And then on the right side, I have some items which there's no guarantee, but I think we can also get to these as well. The multi-tenancy revamp I mentioned earlier is mostly around making that more consistent and easier to use. We've had some requests as well to support other schema formats besides JavaScript. I'm not sure yet which format we'll target first, but we'll examine which ones we think would serve the most utility for our community, and see of these options what we feel would make sense to support next. And then metrics testing and observability. So this is another exciting space, and it's frankly probably it's also emerging, just like this space that we're in. And there was a pretty interesting thread discussion on Slack recently about this. What we are thinking about here is how we would integrate with these other tools, say Monte Carlo or something else that would allow us to give better testing and observability features around Cube, so that you can have validation around your data for Cube as you would for any other data source type. And then join paths and directionality. So I've tripped up myself on this a couple times too. There's some ambiguity here, I think, for how joins work when you're trying to execute a query and you're not sure, for example, what path, what direction the join will take, or what path of join across tables you have available to you. So having a more explicit join definitions here, for example, or even being able to kind of dynamically set that with your queries, I think there's a lot of interesting options here. And so we'll figure out how we can make this more explicit, but also easier to use. I don't think any of these, like figuring out what direction the join should take, should be any concern of the user, the end user whatsoever. So we definitely want to make that straightforward and kind of hide that complexity from the user in this case. And yeah, so in the spirit of being completely transparent with all of you, and I think this is a great community in that we have a lot of lively discussions about what things we all like to see happen next for Cube. I, for what it's worth, definitely keep a close tab on the issues that people have raised in our GitHub project, in particular, the ones that have been upvoted a lot or commented on a lot. So I just wanted to call out a couple things that I noticed were quite active in terms of discussion amongst the community for, say, the past 6 months or so, and just call out that we don't necessarily see a way to prioritize these in the next half year. But if you would like us to reconsider any of these, please do add more comments or upvotes to these items, and we'll either reconsider that or strongly consider prioritizing it for further down the roadmap. And the 3 items I just wanted to call out were large query results. So I know many of you want a way to serve results for when you have over 50,000 rows of data. So that's a large returned result. We definitely see the use case here. We're just not sure yet how to best execute this in a scalable way and a secure way as well. So we're thinking about that, but I don't know if we'll have an answer soon. And then pagination enhancements. So this is mostly pointing back to an issue that was raised around being able to load the number of rows that are going to be returned in a result, so that you can effectively add pagination to your use case. I'm also not sure about that one. And then funnel enhancements. I use this one myself, being a product manager. I find the funnel feature quite useful in terms of doing analytics around user workflow. So I definitely think it has a place with Cube as a feature that will continue to be supported. But I don't yet have room in the roadmap for enhancing, for example, how to order the steps in the funnel in a consistent way. But I'm definitely keeping close tabs on your feedback on all of these items and more. So please continue to keep that discussion going. I think having that discussion in GitHub seems like the best place in terms of like what we should prioritize and things we should consider for the roadmap. So let's continue to do that, and well, excited to work with you on these roadmap items going into the next year. Yeah, and I just wanted to briefly call out our roadmap for Cube Cloud, since that's very strategic for us at CubeDev as well. Our mission with Cube Cloud was always to offer the most developer-friendly experience for Cube, and to take away any of the DevOps concerns that you might have with running Cube yourself, especially in a production environment. So we've done a lot of work this year to make Cube Cloud. We made it GA as of October of this year. And this quarter, we've been spending a lot of time on particularly management of pre-aggregations, Git workflows, things like that. And going into next year, we have a lot of things that I'm excited about, such as working more on query tracing and analytics. So that's giving you the ability to inspect queries that pass through Cube Cloud and see, for example, which ones were really slow, which ones were fast. For the ones that were slow, trying to break down that query and see what were the steps that might have taken the most amount of time, and help you kind of hone those queries to make sure that they're all performant and returning the data that you want. And then if you're using cloud, you probably know that we have a built-in IDE. So, and that's for the Cube schema. Right now, it just uses, I think, out of the box, like JavaScript libraries to do type checking and auto suggestions, which works to an extent, but we would like some more, I guess, tailor fit type checking and auto suggesting for key terms that we use within Cube, and to make that context aware so that we can, for example, if you have dynamic schema, how that would work. We still have yet to figure out, but we want to make it the IDE the best place to write Cube schema as a developer. And then a metrics catalog. So this has come up actually within the community as well. And I think we have at least one member of the community who intends to contribute something like this, but we'll also build into Cube Cloud likely a catalog of metrics that you can kind of treat as like a wiki for your schema. So that will help with kind of analyzing what metrics you have and seeing those kind of at a glance or a high level, and then giving developers a useful reference for what metrics they can use. And then as we're also working on some integrations for other tools in the monitoring and log space. I updated this bullet point, but I'm not sure why it's not refreshed, but we're basically thinking about error handling, logs, how to make the experience around triage and debugging of Cube and issues that might happen with your queries easier, as well as integrating with other tools outside of Cube Cloud that you all use for monitoring and logs of other tools. And then also continue to add more integrations in terms of source control. So we now integrate with GitHub, but we'll add integrations for likely GitLab and Bitbucket soon. And also continue to work on that workflow for managing, for example, different branches in Cube Cloud with your Cube project. So, for example, we're dealing with merge conflicts, being able to implement a end-to-end workflow centered around, your typical software development lifecycle will be easier and more intuitive within cloud. And then credential store integration. So we get this request as a lot as well, being able to store your credentials in a centralized key store, for example, outside of Cube, so that we're not setting, all those as just kind of like environment variables. Offerings for private cloud. So if you want to run Cube, if you want the benefits of Cube being kind of managed for you, but you want to make sure that all of that's within your own infrastructure and that you have, full autonomy over that. The private cloud offering is probably something you would be interested in. Support for Azure. I know this has come up a few times as well. And then some things around making it easier to onboard with various database use cases. So I've seen a couple of people who want to try to hook up their own local host databases, or perhaps are looking for example databases that they can use before they hook up an actual database that they have running, say on AWS or GCP that they're using for real data. So all these things we have on the roadmap for next year, and I'm really excited to see where this will go. And thanks to all of you who've tried out Cube Cloud and have grown to love it just as we have.
Cool. Thanks, Ryan. Yeah, a couple of comments that came through both on Zoom and Livestream. This is more of a comment from Harsha. Hopefully I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Thumbs up on roll-up joins across databases, not surprising. So we look forward to that as well. And Alan Cam made a comment about, I guess they keep running into large query results limitation on occasion. So I don't know if there's already a GitHub issue for that, but feel free to open one, Alan, and just ping me or Ryan, and then we'll see if that's something that we're already working on, if there's a workaround.
Yeah, I linked the issue in the slide. So if you feel it's the same issue, please do add your thumbs up.
Okay. Okay. Cool. That's the same one. All right. And then somebody made a comment that they're going to have to read up on the issues, which is completely fine. I think we covered a lot of stuff in about 15-20 minutes. So yeah, I encourage everyone to comment on the issue or open a new one if you haven't opened one already. So cool. Thank you, Ryan and Artyom. And definitely looking forward to even better 2022. Want to make sure there aren't any other questions. No, it looks like we're good here. All right. So yeah, once again, thank you for a great 2021. Hope everyone have a happy and peaceful holiday, and come back refreshed in the new year. And we look forward to doing this again in about 4 weeks. And I guess, speaking of roadmap, I guess we'll talk about the Q1 roadmap when we do the call the second Wednesday of January. And we'll probably invite a community member to talk about the user story that we're publishing this week. So I think we got couple of agenda items already set, but if you want to see other topics covered, please let us know via Slack. All right, well, thanks everyone, and have a happy holiday, and we'll see you next year. Bye everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.